I overheard my partner's family joking about using me for money, so I broke up with her. I'm 32 male, and let's just say I haven't had much luck in the family department. Grew up with a single mom who did her best, but between two jobs and barely enough money to keep the lights on, warmth wasn't exactly something we had in abundance. Don't get me wrong, I respect the hell out of her for all she did, but let's just say my childhood wasn't filled with big family gatherings, cozy dinners, or anything remotely resembling the family man picture you see on Christmas cards. So, when I met my girlfriend 3 years ago and got a glimpse of her family, it felt like I'd stumbled into a life I'd always wanted. Her family was loud, close-knit, and always around celebrating something, laughing, even arguing, but in a way that felt full and vibrant. They were exactly the kind of family I daydreamed about having. I felt like I'd finally found something stable, something lasting. Her parents welcomed me in with open arms. Her siblings always treated me like one of them, and I felt home. Over time, I became more than just a boyfriend to them. I became the family guy, the one they could count on. I'd spend weekends at their house, join in on Sunday lunches, and got roped into birthdays, graduations, everything. And for a guy who grew up on his own, that attention, that sense of belonging, it meant everything. But the more time I spent with them, the more I started to realize my place wasn't just emotional. It was financial. I'd worked hard to build my own tech consulting business, and finally, I was making a comfortable living. I wasn't rich by any billionaire standard, but I could afford things I never thought possible. And I didn't mind sharing. I didn't even think about it. If they needed something, a bit of help with groceries, covering dinner, fixing things around the house, I didn't hesitate. I was happy to help. To me, it was what family did. I didn't even notice the subtle shift at first. The way their small asks grew, like vines wrapping tighter and tighter around the support I was so willing to offer. The first time it really crossed the line was during a Sunday lunch about a year into our relationship. We were all sitting around, laughing over some story her dad was telling about a fishing trip gone wrong, when my girlfriend leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Hey babe, do you think you could help my dad out with some bills? Things are just tight right now." I remember pausing a bit taken aback, but then reasoning it away. "Sure," I said, "just let me know how much." It felt weird, yes, but I trusted her and I was in love, so I paid it not thinking much of it. But then it kept happening. Her mom needed help with the car repair. Her brother needed money for his insurance. They were all in between something, work, gigs, projects, you name it. And every time, there was a new one-time ask. And each time, I told myself I was just doing my part. Months later, the requests weren't even couched as one time anymore. They became family emergencies, then family expectations. The line between me being a supportive partner and a financial crutch blurred, but I didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. I was caught up in this fantasy of being part of their family, convincing myself that love meant helping those you care about, and that they cared about me too. One Sunday afternoon, though, that illusion shattered. We were all sitting on their back porch, the usual spread of drinks and chips around us. Her brother and dad were talking about some remodeling they wanted to do, and I just tuned out, staring at the view, when I heard her dad say, "Well, with him around, we'll get it done sooner or later." I glanced over, thinking he meant someone else. But then her mom chimed in, saying, "We just need to keep him close. He'll pay for it. He always does. That boy's just happy to be here." There was laughter, like some private joke they were sharing. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like I had been slapped in the face with the reality I had been ignoring for so long. To them, I wasn't family, I was an ATM. I sat there, staring at my drink, willing myself not to react. I felt numb, disgusted. They weren't just joking around. This was casual, like this was something they'd talked about a dozen times. I could feel the bile rising, but I kept a straight face. I didn't want to tip them off that I'd heard, not yet. I needed time to think, to understand what the hell was really going on. That night, lying next to my girlfriend, I could barely breathe. I felt like I didn't know who I was lying next to, who I'd been sharing my life with. The warmth I'd felt, the love, the trust. I didn't know if any of it was real anymore. But I couldn't just walk away without confronting her. The next day, I waited until we were alone, then looked her dead in the eye and asked, "Be honest with me. Do you and your family actually care about me? Or is this about what I can give?" She looked startled, a little taken aback, and tried to laugh it off. "What? Babe, where is this coming from?" But I pressed, explaining that I'd overheard her parents' conversation. Her face went pale, but she quickly tried to cover it. "Oh, you heard that? My parents just joke around. They don't mean anything by it." "Jokes," I repeated, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Jokes are funny. There was nothing funny about what I heard. Do you see me as part of your family, or just someone to pick up the tab?" She got defensive, her tone shifting. "You're overreacting. My family loves you. Yes, maybe we ask for help, but that's only because you're in a position to give it. You said yourself you love helping people. What's the difference?" "The difference," I said, my voice shaking, "is that helping someone isn't the same as being used." The argument spiraled. She went from dismissive to outright accusing me, saying I was selfish, that I was obsessed with my money, that I didn't understand what family really meant. "If you loved me, you'd be okay with supporting the people I love," she threw at me. "If you're serious about us, then you're serious about my family too." "Serious about your family?" I echoed, the reality hitting me like a weight. "Your family sees me as a golden goose, not a person. Is that the kind of love you're talking about?" She stormed out, heading to her parents' place, and I just sat there, feeling gutted. It was like my entire world had been turned upside down. I didn't know what was real, what had been an act. Had I been so desperate for a family that I'd ignored all the warning signs? That week, the call started. Her mom left a voicemail, her tone saccharine, telling me I'd misunderstood, that they'd just joke around, that they were sorry if anything had come off wrong. Her brother texted, acting like nothing was wrong, saying, "Hey bro, hope you're good. Don't sweat it, man. We're family, right?" But I couldn't unhear what I'd heard. I couldn't unknow the truth. I tried to reason with myself, to think maybe it was a misunderstanding, but the more I replayed every moment in my head, the more I realized the pattern. The subtle ways they'd trained me to reach into my pocket, to feel responsible for their problems, to feel like that was what it meant to be part of their family. A few days later, my girlfriend came back, wanted to talk, to patch things up. She said all the right things, tried to make me feel guilty, tried to convince me that I was walking out on love, but I was done. I'd seen what was behind the mask, and I knew that I'd never be more to them than a means to an end. She called me selfish one last time, storming out in tears, and I didn't even feel angry anymore, just empty. I'd lost not just a girlfriend, but a family, or at least the illusion of one. The idea of belonging had been a lie I'd told myself, and accepting that truth was like swallowing glass. In the weeks that followed, I felt the weight of it all. The betrayal, the loneliness, the sense that I'd been nothing but a wallet to the people I'd cared for so deeply. I confided in a few friends, and to my surprise, several of them admitted they'd noticed the pattern early on. One even said he'd heard my girlfriend's brother joking about me being the bank, but hadn't wanted to say anything for fear of hurting me. Hearing that hurt, but it also brought me clarity. I'd been so focused on the idea of family, of being needed, that I'd let myself be taken advantage of. I'd ignored the red flags, because I was so desperate to believe that I'd finally found a family that cared about me. That realization was brutal. It wasn't just that I'd been used. It was that I'd willingly ignored the truth to keep this picture-perfect illusion alive. After she left, there was silence. The kind that feels like it's pressing down on you. No calls, no texts, nothing. I wondered if they'd just written me off, maybe found another helper to keep things afloat. But then, about a month later, her dad reached out, said he wanted to meet. To clear the air, I agreed, more out of curiosity than anything else. I wanted to see if they'd try to convince me that everything I'd experienced was just in my head, or if they'd finally come clean. We met at a small diner off the highway, and he walked in looking serious, but oddly casual, like he hadn't just been part of a scheme to milk me dry. "Listen," he started, leaning back in his seat as if this was a business negotiation. "I know things got a bit tense, but we didn't mean for you to feel like that. We really do care about you. You're a good guy. You know that? Good for our girl. Good for the family. I stared at him, unimpressed. Care about me? I repeated, struggling to keep my voice steady. Or care about what I can give. He gave a dismissive laugh, like I was being overly dramatic. Look, every family's got needs, and if you're serious about a future with her, those needs are going to be a part of your life too. That's what family is. Helping each other out, I felt my stomach churn. The sheer entitlement dripping from his words was mind-blowing. Helping each other out, I said, my voice low. Isn't the same as using someone? He shrugged, not even fazed. Call it what you want. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be part of this family, you're expected to contribute. And frankly, if money's what it takes to keep things comfortable for everyone, then what's the problem? I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Here he was not even trying to hide it anymore. I realized then that I'd never been a person to just a resource. The problem, I said, feeling my voice tremble with barely contained anger, is that I'm done being your wallet. He scoffed, muttering something under his breath about me, not understanding family. He stood up, threw a few bucks on the table, and left without looking back, as if I was the one who'd crossed the line. That meeting was the nail in the coffin. There was no coming back from that. I knew that whatever illusion I'd clung to was dead. They didn't want me for who I was. They wanted me for what I could give. I blocked all of them after that. My ex, her parents, her brother, everyone. I deleted every message, every photo, every trace of them from my life. I felt hollow, but at least I wasn't carrying their weight anymore. The relief was gradual, but it came. In the months that followed, I threw myself into work, trying to rebuild the parts of me I'd let them chip away. I reconnected with old friends, spent more time with people who knew me for who I really was, who didn't see me as just a source of cash. Looking back, I realized just how blind I'd been. I wanted so badly to belong, to have a family, that I'd convinced myself I had one. I'd let myself be pulled into a toxic cycle of dependency, disguised as love. And it took hearing the truth, plain and ugly, to snap me out of it. But I learned something from it all. Love isn't about what you can give. It's about who you are with each other when you have nothing to gain. And real family doesn't look at you and see dollar signs. They look at you and see you. So now, I'm moving forward, maybe with a little more caution, a little more skepticism, but also with a lot more respect for myself. I won't be the bank for anyone ever again. And maybe someday I'll find a family that loves me for me. But until then, I'm done trying to buy my way into someone else's. That was the day I stopped letting my loneliness make my decisions. And I'll never let myself forget that. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. So please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.
We need that for your sister's Maldives trip, my mother hissed after stealing $25,000 from my card. I canceled it immediately. Now they're facing fraud charges. I'm 25, independent and hardworking. I pay my bills, make smart financial decisions, and do my best to stay on top of things. I've been this way since I was a teenager, partly by necessity and partly because that's just who I am. My parents never had to worry about me. I was always the easy child, the one who didn't cause problems. I got good grades without being reminded, worked part-time jobs throughout high school, paid for my own car insurance, and even contributed to household expenses when money was tight. Then there's my sister, Emily, who's 21. She's spoiled, entitled, and has never had to work for anything in her life. Our parents have always treated her like she could do no wrong, and I've always been the responsible one, the one who gets overlooked and taken for granted. This dynamic started early. When we were kids, Emily would throw tantrums if she didn't get what she wanted, while I learned quickly that the path of least resistance was to just be agreeable. By the time I was 10, the pattern was set. Emily got new clothes, the latest toys, and constant attention. I got practical gifts, praise only when I achieved something significant, and was often told to be the bigger person when conflicts arose between us. High school only amplified the differences in how we were treated. When I needed a laptop for schoolwork, I saved up for months working at a local grocery store. When Emily wanted the same laptop 2 years later, not for schoolwork, but because it was cute, our parents bought it without hesitation. By college, I was completely self-sufficient. I worked 2 jobs while maintaining a 3.8 GPA, paid my own tuition through scholarships and student loans, and even sent money home occasionally when my parents hinted they were struggling. Meanwhile, Emily dropped out after one semester because college wasn't her thing, but our parents didn't bat an eye. Instead, they let her live at home rent-free while she found herself. She cycled through minimum wage jobs, never lasting more than a few months at any of them, but always had the latest iPhone and designer clothes. 2 years ago, when my parents' car was about to be repossessed, I stepped in. They called me crying, saying they couldn't make the payments and needed help. Just until we get back on our feet, they promised. So I added their car loan to my monthly expenses, another $350 that I really couldn't afford but somehow managed to pay. I never saw a cent of that money returned, but I told myself it was the right thing to do. Family helps family, right? But this time, they went too far. I never expected the bombshell that came one day when I checked my credit card statement. What I found left me reeling and questioning everything I thought I knew about my family. It all started with a routine check of my credit card balance one morning. I rarely used the card, so I expected to see a small amount on the statement. I kept it mainly for emergencies and to build my credit score, preferring to pay for most things with my debit card, but what I found made my heart stop. A pending charge for $25,000 was staring back at me. My mind raced as I clicked on the details of the transaction. The charge was from a luxury travel agency, which only made sense when I thought about my younger sister Emily's obsession with extravagant vacations. Emily had been posting on Instagram for weeks about her dream trip to the Maldives, overwater bungalows, private butlers, seaplane transfers, the works. I'd rolled my eyes at her posts, knowing there was no way she could afford such an extravagant trip on her meager and inconsistent income. I'd assumed she was just daydreaming the way she often did about things she couldn't have. But this was different. This wasn't just an expense. This was an outrageous amount. I knew I hadn't spent that money, so someone had been trying to use my card without my permission. My parents, who had access to my credit card for emergencies, seemed like the only suspects. I'd given them the card information during a family emergency 2 years ago when my dad needed an urgent dental procedure and their credit was maxed out. I'd never imagined they'd keep the information or use it without asking me, but this wasn't just a small transaction. This was something far worse. They had tried to use my hard-earned money to fund Emily's lavish trip. In a haze of confusion and anger, I immediately called my credit card company. After verifying my identity, I told them to cancel the transaction immediately and freeze my card to prevent further unauthorized charges. The customer service representative sounded alarmed. "Do you want to report this as fraud?" she asked. The question made me pause. It was fraud technically, but could I really report my own parents? "Let me handle it my way first," I replied, throat tight with emotion. They were efficient, but my mind was far from settled. I was furious. My own parents had tried to steal from me, and for what? To fund my sister's spoiled lifestyle. As I was still processing this, my phone pinged with a message from Emily. My stomach churned as I opened it. There was a selfie of her wearing oversized sunglasses and a floppy hat, clearly in shopping mode for her trip. "Getting my vacation wardrobe ready, so excited for the Maldives next week. Sucks you can't afford nice trips like this. Maybe someday when you're not so boring and actually live a little." Her message only made the fire inside me burn hotter. The audacity of her message, the casual cruelty of her words. It was all too much. She had no idea what had just happened. She had no idea that her trip had been canceled by me. And she certainly had no clue that her dream vacation was being funded by stealing from the very sister she was mocking. I stayed silent, letting her think everything was fine, but I knew that I couldn't keep this quiet for long. The moment my parents realized what I had done, I knew they would explode. It didn't take long before the storm hit. 15 minutes later, my mom called me, shrieking in anger. The travel agency had informed her that the payment had been declined. My sister's vacation plans were ruined, and of course she immediately blamed me. Not once did she acknowledge what she'd done, using my credit card without permission. In her mind, I was the villain for stopping her. I answered the phone calmly, though my blood was boiling. "What happened?" I asked innocently, buying myself a moment to collect my thoughts. "You canceled the payment," she screamed, her voice so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Emily's trip is ruined. She's devastated. How could you do this to your own sister?" "Oh, that?" I responded nonchalantly. "Yeah, I canceled my credit card." "What do you mean you canceled it?" she demanded. "We needed that for Emily's trip. She's been looking forward to this for months." I could hear the panic in her voice, and it felt strangely satisfying. For once, I wasn't rushing to fix a problem they'd created. "Why were you even using my card?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. There was silence on the other end. Then my mom stammered out a weak excuse: "We were going to pay you back." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, really? When? With what money?" The absurdity of her claim was almost comical. They'd never paid back any money they'd borrowed from me, not even when they explicitly promised to do so. The car loan I was still paying was evidence enough of that. Then came the guilt trip, the manipulation that I was so used to. "We did this for Emily. She deserves this trip. You know how hard she's had it lately." My mother's voice took on that familiar wheedling tone she used whenever she wanted something from me. Hard, Emily? I nearly choked on the irony. My sister had never had a hard day in her life. Last month, she'd quit her part-time job at a boutique because her manager had asked her to work a Saturday shift. The month before that, she'd totaled her car while texting and driving, and our parents had immediately replaced it without so much as a lecture about responsibility. At this point, my father's voice came into the conversation, his anger growing by the second. He must have grabbed the phone from my mother. "Sophia, you better fix this right now." His tone was the one he'd used when we were children, the one that brooked no argument and expected immediate compliance. But I wasn't a child anymore, and I wasn't going to back down. "Fix it? Fix what exactly? The fact that you stole my credit card information? The fact that you were going to spend $25,000 of my money without even asking me?" My voice was rising now, anger finally breaking through my carefully constructed calm. I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Oh, I'm the one who has to fix everything, right? You've been stealing from me, using my money for a vacation, and now you expect me to just let it go." They didn't have an answer, but my mom didn't give up easily. "We raised you, we gave you everything, and now the one time we ask for help, you treat us like criminals." "Ask for help?" I nearly screamed the words. "You didn't ask, you took, and this isn't the one time, it's every time. I'm paying for your car, I paid for Dad's dental work, I helped with the mortgage last Christmas. When does it end?" The argument escalated, and I could feel the years of resentment bubbling to the surface. This wasn't just about $25,000. It was about everything: the manipulation, the favoritism, the constant expectations that I would pick up the slack for everyone else. "That's not fair," my mother protested weakly. "We've always treated you girls equally." "Equally?" I was shouting now. "When have you ever treated us equally? Name one time, Mom, just one." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. They couldn't name a single instance because there wasn't one. In their minds, they probably had convinced themselves they were fair parents, but reality told a different story. But I was done being the responsible one, done being taken advantage of, done being the family ATM while my sister got all the love, attention, and support. I hung up on them and immediately took action. I canceled the car loan payments I had been making for my parents, payments I'd been covering because they claimed they couldn't afford it. I wasn't going to let them use me any longer. I was cutting them off. Update 1. I didn't realize just how determined they were to make me pay for standing up to them until the next day, when my phone started ringing with calls from various family members and even a few mutual friends. My cousin texted asking why I was being so cruel to my sister. My uncle called to lecture me about family loyalty. A childhood friend messaged asking if I was okay because she'd heard I was having some kind of breakdown. They had started a full-scale smear campaign against me. My mother had apparently been busy calling everyone we knew, spinning a tale of her ungrateful, mentally unstable daughter who was cruelly sabotaging her poor sister out of jealousy. According to the story making the rounds, I had promised to help pay for Emily's trip as a graduation gift, then vindictively pulled the money at the last minute because I was envious of her happiness. It was breathtaking in its audacity and completely false, but people were believing it. Even people who had known me for years were suddenly looking at me differently, questioning my character based on my mother's lies. The manipulation didn't stop there. My parents took to social media, with my mother posting a tearful status about how heartbroken she was that family relationships can fall apart so suddenly. She didn't mention me by name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. The comments were filled with sympathy for her and outrage on Emily's behalf. Emily, not to be outdone, posted a long rant about toxic people who pretend to care about you but then stab you in the back. She included vague references to mental health issues and implied that I was unstable and dangerous. She even went so far as to suggest that she was afraid of what I might do next. It was character assassination, pure and simple, and it was working. People I had considered friends were suddenly distant. Family members who had always been neutral in our disputes were taking sides and not mine. The narrative was spreading like wildfire, and I was being painted as the villain in a story where I was actually the victim. That evening, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by screenshots of their messages, social media posts, and notes from the calls I'd received. Their manipulation was more extensive and more damaging than I had ever anticipated. They weren't just trying to get money from me anymore, they were actively trying to destroy my reputation, my relationships. I realized I needed to protect myself legally. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore, it was defamation, potential workplace harassment, and attempted fraud with the credit card charge. I had ignored their behavior for too long, making excuses for them because they were family. But family doesn't try to destroy you when you refuse to be exploited. I made a decision that night, one that I knew would change everything. I decided to sue them. I didn't just want my money back, I also wanted justice served. I wanted a legal record of what they had done, something they couldn't twist or manipulate or deny. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer who specialized in family law and financial fraud. I explained the situation, the unauthorized credit card charge, the pattern of financial exploitation. Over the next week, I gathered evidence. I printed out bank statements showing the regular car payments I'd been making for my parents. I collected screenshots of every manipulative text message and social media post. I recorded statements from friends who had received calls from my mother spreading lies about me. The evidence painted a clear picture of a family that had emotionally and financially exploited me for years, and who were now engaged in a coordinated campaign to damage my reputation and livelihoods because I had dared to say no to them. My lawyer started preparing the lawsuit, and I braced myself for the storm that was coming. I knew that once my parents were served with legal papers, their manipulation would reach new heights. They would play the victim more aggressively than ever, portraying me as a monster who was attacking her own family. But for the first time, I didn't care what they said about me. I didn't care what lies they spread or who believed them. I had the truth on my side, documented and indisputable. I had evidence of their behavior, their manipulation, their attempts to damage me, and I had my own strength finally unleashed after years of suppression. The day the papers were served, my phone exploded with notifications. My mother had immediately taken to Facebook to post a tearful video about her mentally disturbed daughter who was breaking her heart. My father called me, yelling and threatening, until I blocked his number. Emily sent a barrage of hateful messages, each one more vicious than the last. But none of it touched me. I was done being their victim. I was done being manipulated, exploited, and gaslit. I was taking back control of my life, one legal document at a time. Update 2. The weeks leading up to our court date were intensely stressful. My lawyer filed a civil suit for the unauthorized use of my credit card, defamation, and emotional distress. We sought compensation for the attempted $25,000 charge, the car payments I'd been making for my parents, totaling over $8,400, and additional damages for their smear campaign. My parents hired their own attorney, an old friend of my father's who specialized in family law. He sent threatening letters claiming I was pursuing a frivolous lawsuit and warning of countersuits if I didn't drop the case. My lawyer assured me this was a standard intimidation tactic designed to make me back down. Meanwhile, my mother intensified her social media campaign, portraying herself as the victim of a vengeful daughter who was tearing the family apart with baseless legal threats. My sister joined in, posting tearful videos about being afraid of my unstable behavior. Former friends sent concerned messages, suggesting I seek therapy or expressing disappointment in my actions. The most painful blow came when my grandmother called, pleading with me to drop the lawsuit. She had always been neutral in family disputes, but now she was thoroughly convinced by my parents' version of events. The call left me hollow and briefly considered giving up the fight. During the discovery phase, my lawyer subpoenaed my parents' financial records, revealing shocking information. While claiming they couldn't afford their car payments, which I had been covering for 2 years, they had spent thousands on luxury items for Emily, designer clothes, weekend getaways, and a spa membership. We also discovered they had taken out a small loan in my name during my college years, using personal information from forms I had signed without my knowledge or consent. As the court date approached, my parents' attorney offered a settlement. They would repay the car loan payments and stop the negative social media campaign if I dropped all claims and signed a non-disclosure agreement. I countered, requesting full repayment of all money I had given them, approximately $15,000, a formal retraction of their defamatory statements, and no non-disclosure agreement. They rejected my terms. On the court day, the proceedings were formal and intimidating. After opening statements, my lawyer presented our evidence, credit card statements, bank records, text messages, and witness testimonials. She showed screenshots of my mother's social media posts and played a recorded call where my father had threatened me. In their defense, my parents claimed I had verbally agreed to help pay for Emily's vacation as a graduation gift, and they had simply misunderstood the arrangement. Under cross-examination, however, my mother admitted they had never directly asked permission to use my credit card and hadn't apologized when confronted. During my testimony, I described the history of financial support I had provided and the shock of discovering the credit card charge. Their lawyer attempted to portray me as cold and uncaring, but I maintained that refusing to have $25,000 stolen from me wasn't heartless but a reasonable boundary. After both sides presented closing arguments, the judge called a recess. Those 2 hours felt interminable. When court resumed, the judge ruled in my favor on all counts. She ordered my parents to repay me $15,273.42 plus interest, and granted a temporary restraining order preventing them from contacting my workplace or posting defamatory content about me. My parents looked stunned. They had clearly expected their misunderstanding defense to work. As we left the courtroom, I felt a complex mix of relief, vindication, and grief, the formal end of what had once been a family relationship. After the court ruling, everything went quiet. My parents complied with the order, depositing the full amount within the 30-day deadline and removing the defamatory social media posts. Initially, I kept expecting them to find some new way to contact me, to restart the cycle of manipulation and guilt. Then something surprising happened. I felt free. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of my family's expectations on my shoulders. I wasn't worrying about my sister's tantrums or my parents' guilt trips. I didn't have to check my bank account anxiously, wondering if I had enough to cover both my expenses and whatever crisis they had created. I started focusing on my own life. I earned a promotion, started saving money, and put a deposit on a small condo, something I'd never thought possible while supporting my family. I began dating again after years of having no emotional energy for relationships. Most importantly, I began to heal. I found a therapist who specialized in family trauma, and through our sessions, I recognized the patterns of manipulation that had defined my relationships with my parents and sister. I learned that what I had experienced had a name, financial abuse, and that it was more common than I had realized. In the end, walking away wasn't about abandoning my family. It was about reclaiming my life and my future. I've never been more at peace than I am now, living authentically on my own terms, free from the cycles of manipulation and exploitation that had defined so much of my existence. Sometimes the family we're born into isn't the family we deserve. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to let go of toxic relationships, even when those relationships are with the people who are supposed to love us the most.
I paid off the last of my in-laws' debt on a Tuesday. $347,000, spread across 17 months of wire transfers, consolidation loans, and one particularly ugly negotiation with a collections agency that wanted to garnish my father-in-law's already pathetic pension. The final payment cleared at 2:47 p.m. Pacific Time. I remember because I was sitting in my office overlooking the Embarcadero, watching container ships drift past Treasure Island, thinking about how much lighter I'd feel once this particular anchor was cut loose. By Thursday evening, my wife Rebecca told me she wanted a divorce. Not wanted, needed. Those were her exact words, delivered across our kitchen island while I was meal prepping chicken breasts for the week. I need a divorce, Jason. I need to be honest with myself about what I really want. She was wearing yoga pants and a Cal Berkeley sweatshirt, the same one she'd had since college, with a small bleach stain near the hem that she'd never bothered to fix because it was comfortable. That detail stuck with me. The sweatshirt. Like my brain was trying to find something concrete to hold onto while the foundation shifted beneath my feet. I set down the knife. Washed my hands, took a breath. "Okay," I said. "Can I ask why?" She looked relieved that I wasn't yelling. "That should have been my first clue. I've been thinking about this for a while," she said. "We got married for the wrong reasons. I was young, you were stable, and I convinced myself that was enough. But it's not. It never was." 8 years, I said. "You've been thinking about this for how long? Does it matter?" I dried my hands on a dish towel, one of the expensive ones Rebecca had insisted we needed from that boutique in Hayes Valley. $40 for a piece of cotton. Yeah, it actually does. Given that I just finished paying off your parents' mortgage, their medical bills, and your brother's DUI legal fees, timing matters in these situations. Her face did this thing where the guilt flashed across it for maybe half a second before getting buried under defensiveness. I'd seen it before, usually when I brought up money, which I'd learned not to do because it made her feel small. That was the phrase she always used. Like my pointing out that I'd covered 100% of our household expenses for the last 3 years was somehow an attack on her character rather than just a statement of fact. "This isn't about money," she said. "Everything's about money, Becca. That's what I do for a living. I'm a senior analyst at a venture capital firm. I quite literally evaluate financial risk and return on investment for a living. So yeah, when my wife of 8 years tells me she wants out 2 days after I make the final payment on her family's 6-figure debt, I'm going to run the numbers." She crossed her arms. "You're being reductive. I'm being accurate. See, this is exactly why we don't work," she said, her voice rising. "Everything with you is a transaction. Everything's a spreadsheet. I can't live like that anymore." I could have pointed out that she'd lived like that just fine when my spreadsheets were keeping her parents from losing their house in Dali City. I could have mentioned that she'd had no problem with my transactional nature when I was covering the $17,000 bill for her mother's emergency gallbladder surgery because they'd let their health insurance lapse. But I didn't. I just stood there watching her work herself up into righteous anger and waited. "I reconnected with someone," she finally said. "From college, Trevor. He reached out on Instagram a few months ago and we've been talking, and Jason, it's like I remembered who I used to be, before all this. Before I became some tech wife living in a condo I didn't choose, eating meal prepped chicken and pretending I'm happy. Trevor." Of course it was Trevor. I'd heard about Trevor exactly 3 times in 8 years, always in the context of Rebecca's bohemian phase at Berkeley. Trevor the philosophy major. Trevor who played guitar at coffee shops in Telegraph. Trevor who'd broken her heart by moving to Portland to find himself the summer after graduation. "Trevor fucking Walsh," I said. "Don't be like that." "How should I be exactly?" Your college boyfriend who bilayed on you to sell handmade soap in the Pacific Northwest, or whatever the hell he's been doing for the last 15 years, slides into your DMs and suddenly our marriage is a prison. He's grown a lot since then. He's done a lot of soul searching. He's authentic in a way you've never been. I laughed. I actually laughed. Authentic, got it. Does authentic Trevor have a job or is soul searching a full-time gig these days? He's a freelance graphic designer. Monthly income. Jesus Christ, Jason. No, I'm genuinely curious, because I'm trying to understand what authentic looks like when the rent's due. My bad for being reductive. She grabbed her phone off the counter. I'm going to my parents' house. We can talk about this when you're ready to be an adult. Your parents know, she hesitated. I told them I was unhappy. They've been supportive. Of course they had been. Dennis and Carol Rodriguez, who'd spent the last year and a half treating me like a combination ATM and personal concierge service, were suddenly supportive of their daughter blowing up her marriage. That tracked perfectly. She left. I stood in the kitchen for maybe 10 minutes just processing, then I sat down at my laptop and did what I always do when I need clarity. I pulled up my files. Our marriage was an LLC, legally speaking, but California's a community property state, which meant everything we'd accumulated during the marriage was split 50-50. The condo was in both our names. The cars, same deal. The investment accounts, joint. On paper, it looked like we'd built something together. In reality, I'd built something and she'd lived in it. But that's what the court would see, and I was fine with it. I'd make more money. I always did. What interested me more was the other file. The one labeled Rodriguez Family Financial History, XLSX, that I'd been maintaining for the last 3 years as I systematically bilayed them out of one crisis after another. The original mortgage was in Dennis's name, purchased in 1987 for $93,000. They'd refinanced 4 times, most recently taking out $220,000 in a cash-out refi in 2019 to consolidate debt. That debt, as far as I could tell, consisted primarily of Carol's online shopping addiction and Dennis's belief that he could flip classic cars despite having no mechanical knowledge whatsoever. By 2023, they were underwater and facing foreclosure. That's when I stepped in. Not because Dennis asked, he was too proud, but because Rebecca begged. Her exact words, "They're going to lose everything. I can't watch that happen. Please, Jason, we can afford it." We couldn't, actually. Not without me taking on extra consulting work, selling off some stock positions I'd been holding for tax purposes, and generally restructuring my entire financial plan. But I did it anyway because that's what you do for family. You show up. You solve the problem. You don't ask for credit. The mortgage payoff was $247,000. The medical bills were $63,000. The legal fees for Rebecca's brother Marcus's DUI were $12,000. Various smaller debts, credit cards, personal loans, a payment plan with the IRS added another $25,000. Total, $347,000 transferred out of accounts I'd built from a decade of 80-hour weeks and strategic career moves. The house, though, that was interesting. When I'd negotiated the payoff with the bank, they'd insisted on a clear title. No joint ownership, no complex trust structures, just one name on the deed. Dennis and Carol were in no position to qualify for a new mortgage, so I'd offered a simple solution. I'd buy it from them. $50,000, which was insultingly low, but about all they'd have equity in after fees and penalties. They could keep living there rent-free. It was a gift, essentially. A very expensive gift that let them maintain their dignity. The paperwork had gone through in February. The title was in my name. Jason Mitchell, sole owner of 2847 Palmetto Avenue, Dolly City, California. I'd done it to protect them. Now I was going to use it to teach them a lesson. Friday morning, I called my attorney, David Bradford. We'd gone to business school together, and he'd helped me structure the house purchase specifically to avoid gift tax implications. He picked up on the second ring. "Jason, how's life? Rebecca wants a divorce." "Shit, I'm sorry, man. Don't be. I need you to draft an eviction notice for 2847 Palmetto Avenue. Standard California 30-day. Tenants are Dennis and Carol Rodriguez. Deliver its certified mail today if possible. There was a long pause. Her parents, correct. You're evicting your in-laws, soon-to-be ex-in-laws, the property's in my name. They're month-to-month tenants, technically speaking, even though I've never collected rent. I'm terminating the tenancy. 30 days by the book. Jason, are you sure you want to? David, you're my lawyer, not my therapist. Can you draft it or not? Yeah, I can draft it. I just want to make sure you've thought through the optics here. The optics are that I own a house I paid $300,000 to acquire, and I'm exercising my legal right to determine who lives in it. Send the notice. Done. Anything else? I need you to file the divorce response. No contest, but I want a full accounting of community property and separate property. The Rodriguez payoff came entirely from my separate accounts, premarital investments and inheritance from my grandmother. I want that documented. Smart. I'll get started on the filings. Jason. Yeah, this is going to get ugly. It was already ugly, David. I'm just deciding how it ends. I hung up and opened my banking app. Rebecca had a credit card on my account. It was supposed to be for household expenses, groceries and utilities, that kind of thing. I pulled up the last 6 months of statements and started scrolling. February, $847 at Nordstrom, $230 at that organic wine place in No Valley, $340 at some restaurant in Oakland I'd never heard of. March, $1,200 at Restoration Hardware, $89 at Blue Bottle Coffee, spread across multiple transactions, $650 at a hotel in Napa. We hadn't gone to Napa in March. I'd been in Chicago for a conference. I kept scrolling. The pattern was obvious once you looked for it. Every time I traveled for work, there'd be charges at restaurants, bars, hotels. Nothing huge, nothing that would flag as fraud, just the steady accumulation of a double life funded by my Amex. I called the card company, reported it as an authorized user I was removing. They canceled her card immediately. No drama, no questions, just corporate efficiency. Then I texted her, eviction notice for your parents arrives Monday, 30 days to vacate, also canceled your credit card, you'll need to get your own. Jay, she called within 90 seconds. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. On the third call I picked up. What the hell, Jason? Which part? You're evicting my parents. Are you insane? No, I'm practical. We're getting divorced. Why would I continue to provide free housing to people who aren't my family anymore? They're in their 60s. Where are they supposed to go? Not my problem, Becca. They have 30 days. That's well above the legal minimum in California. They'll figure it out. This is cruel. This is you being vindictive and small. Really. Because I thought cruelty was letting me pay off $300,000 in debt and then announcing you're leaving me for your unemployed ex-boyfriend 2 days later. But hey, maybe I'm confused about definitions. Trevor's not unemployed, he's a freelance graphic designer. Yeah, you mentioned. How's his credit? Because you're going to need someone who can co-sign a lease, and I'm guessing the soul-searching didn't include building a 750 FICO score. I have my own credit. You have an apartment rental history that consists entirely of living in places I paid for. You have a work history with an 18-month gap when you decided to find your passion. Good luck with that application. She was crying now. Why are you being like this? I'm being exactly who I've always been, Rebecca. I'm the guy who solves problems. Your problem is that you need somewhere to live and money to live on. My problem is that I was married to someone who saw me as a solution instead of a person. I'm solving my problem. You can solve yours. My parents can call me if they want to discuss the eviction. I'm not negotiating through you. I hung up, blocked her number. Made myself a protein shake and went to the gym. The eviction notice was delivered Monday at 10:17 a.m. I know because Dennis called me at 10:34, which meant he'd opened it immediately and completely lost his shit. Jason, what the hell is this? It's a notice of termination of tenancy, Dennis. Pretty standard legal document. You're kicking us out of our house. It's my house. I paid for it. You've been living there as a courtesy. The courtesy is ending. Because of Rebecca, you're punishing us because she's leaving you. I'm making a sound financial decision. Maintaining a property for people who aren't family anymore doesn't make sense. You've got 30 days. If you need help finding an apartment, I can send you some listings. Dolly City's got some decent options in the $1,200 range for a one-bedroom. $1,200. We can't afford that. Then you'll need to adjust your expectations. Maybe look at something in Hayward or Concord. The East Bay's more affordable. Carol has doctors here. Our whole life is here. Dennis, with all due respect, your whole life was about to be foreclosed on before I intervened. You had options then, you have options now. They're just not options where I subsidize your lifestyle anymore. He switched tactics. Rebecca said you canceled her credit card. I removed an authorized user from my account. That's allowed. How is she supposed to buy groceries? The same way everyone else does, with money she earns. She doesn't have a job. Sounds like she should get one. There was a long silence. Then, I thought you were better than this, Jason. I thought you were the kind of people who'd have my back when your daughter decided to blow up our marriage, Dennis. We're both disappointed. The difference is I'm not asking you for anything. I hung up. Carol called the next day. She tried the gentle approach, the whole "we've always thought of you as a son" routine. I let her talk for about 3 minutes, then interrupted. Carol, if you thought of me as a son, you would have told me Rebecca was unhappy. You would have encouraged her to work on our marriage instead of supporting her decision to leave. You didn't. You chose your daughter over basic decency, which I get, but that choice has consequences. We didn't know about Trevor. Yes, you did. She told me she told you she was unhappy. That means you knew she was checking out of the marriage and you didn't think I deserved a heads up. That's fine. It's your right to prioritize your daughter, but it's my right to prioritize my own financial security. What about family? Carol, family is supposed to be the people who show up for you. I showed up for you. I paid your mortgage. I paid your medical bills. I paid for Marcus's lawyer when he got his 3rd DUI. I did that because I thought we were building something together. We weren't. I was being used. So no, I don't feel bad about evicting you. I feel bad that it took me this long to realize you never saw me as family. I was just the guy with the checkbook. She hung up. Rebecca tried calling from different numbers. Her brother Marcus sent me a long text about how I was destroying the family. I deleted it without reading past the first sentence. The thing about revenge is that it's not supposed to feel good. That's what people get wrong. They expect this rush of vindication, this moment where everything clicks into place and you feel justified. It doesn't work like that. Revenge is just consequence management. You remove yourself from a situation where you're being exploited and you let the natural results play out. The satisfaction, if there is any, comes from watching people face reality without you there to cushion the impact. Week 1, Rebecca moved in with her parents. I knew because she started posting Instagram stories from their house. Lots of blurry shots of Carol's garden, captions about finding peace in family. No mention of Trevor, which I found interesting. Week 2, the reality set in. Dennis called from a number I didn't have blocked. Jason, we need to talk about this. Reasonably, adult to adult. Okay, Carol and I have been looking at apartments. Everything in our price range is either too small or in a bad area. We have too much furniture. We have a dog. Nobody wants to rent to people our age with a dog. That's rough. Have you thought about selling some of the furniture? Facebook Marketplace is pretty active. This isn't funny. I'm not joking. You have a 4-bedroom house worth of stuff and you need a 1-bedroom apartment. Basic math says you need to downsize. Where's Rebecca supposed to go? Again, not my problem. She's a 34-year-old adult with a college degree. She'll figure it out. She's your wife. She's my soon-to-be ex-wife who's in love with someone else. If Trevor's so great, he can help her figure it out. There was a pause. Trevor moved back to Portland. I almost laughed. When? Last week. Rebecca didn't want to talk about it. Of course he did. Trevor, the authentic Trevor, the soul searcher, had presumably discovered that Rebecca came with baggage. Not the emotional kind, he probably loved that part, the whole wounded bird thing, but the practical kind. The kind where she had no money, no job, and a family crisis he'd have to help manage. That kind of baggage. Well, I said, sounds like she's learning an important lesson about the difference between romance and partnership. You're enjoying this. I'm enduring it, Dennis. There's a difference. You've got 2 weeks left. I'd suggest you start packing. Week 3, Rebecca showed up at my office. Security called up first. Mr. Mitchell, there's a Rebecca Rodriguez here to see you. She's not on your approved list. Tell her I'm in a meeting. She says she'll wait. Tell her I'm in meetings all day and she should email me through her lawyer. Will do. She was still in the lobby when I left at 7 p.m. I walked right past her to the parking garage. She followed me. Jason, please, just 5 minutes. I stopped. You've got 3. This is insane. You're destroying my entire family over a breakup. I'm not destroying anything. I'm removing my support. If your family's entire existence depended on my money, that's not my fault. That's a structural problem you should have addressed years ago. Where are we supposed to go? I don't know, Becca. Where were you planning to go with Trevor? What was the plan there? She looked at the ground. That didn't work out. I'm shocked, truly. A guy who bails on you once bails on you again when things get complicated. Who could have seen that coming? Don't be an asshole. I'm not being an asshole, I'm being accurate. You wanted authentic. You got authentic. Turns out authentic doesn't pay bills. So that's it, 8 years and you just walk away. You walked away, Rebecca. I'm just not following you. The Jason I married would have helped us. The Jason you married is the one you left. This is the Jason who learned his lesson. You want to know what it is? She didn't answer. Love without respect is exploitation. You never respected me. You respected my bank account. And the second you thought you could find something more exciting, you bylaid. That's fine. People make choices. But choices have consequences, and I'm not responsible for managing those consequences anymore. My parents are going to end up in some shitty apartment in the Central Valley. Then maybe they should have raised a daughter who understood loyalty, or at least basic gratitude. I got in my car and drove away. The 30th day was a Saturday. I drove to Dolly City at 10 a.m. with a moving truck and 3 guys from a company that specialized in evictions. I'd already arranged for their stuff to go into storage, paid for the first month. I'm not a monster. I just wasn't going to be a doormat anymore. The house was empty when we got there. They'd cleared out sometime Friday night based on the condition of the place. They'd taken everything except some trash in the kitchen and a note on the counter. It was from Dennis, written on the back of one of my old business cards that he must have kept. You were right about one thing. We should have respected you more. But you're wrong about love. Love doesn't abandon people when they make mistakes. You didn't love Rebecca. You loved the idea of being the hero. Now you get to be the villain instead. Hope it was worth it. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. Spent the next 4 hours walking through the house with a contractor making plans for renovations. The place had good bones. With some work, it could rent for $2,500 a month, easy. I was patching a hole in the living room wall when Rebecca called. Different number, so it went through. They're in Stockton, she said. A 1-bedroom apartment next to a freeway. My mom's crying because she can't have her garden. My dad's not speaking to anyone. Marcus is sleeping on their couch. And I'm in a studio in the Tenderloin because it's all I could afford. Are you happy? No. Then why? Because you needed to learn that actions have consequences. You can't just take and take and take from someone and then act surprised when they stop giving. That's not how the world works. We needed you. No, you needed my money. There's a difference. If Trevor had been rich, you'd have left me anyway and none of this would have happened. Your whole family would have just moved on to the next ATM. But he wasn't. So now you're figuring out what life looks like when you have to actually work for things. I loved you. You loved what I could do for you. That's not the same thing. What about you? Her voice was shaking. Did you ever actually love me, or was I just another investment? I thought about it, really thought about it. I loved who I thought you were. Turns out I was wrong, that's on me. But here's the thing, Becca. When you love someone, you show up, you support them. You don't drain them dry and then complain that they're not fun anymore. I showed up for you and your family for 8 years. I paid for everything. I asked for nothing except basic partnership, and you couldn't even give me that. So this is revenge. No, this is me protecting myself from being used again. You want to call it revenge, fine. But from where I'm standing, it's just consequences. Natural consequences of treating someone like a resource instead of a person. There was a long silence. My parents want to know if there's anything they can do to fix this. They can't. They said they'll apologize. They said they were wrong. They were wrong. But apologizing doesn't change the fundamental problem, which is that none of you saw me as family until the money stopped. You want me to believe you care about me now that you're in a shitty apartment in Stockton. That's not love, Rebecca, that's desperation. What if I came back? No, I made a mistake. I see that now. Trevor was a fantasy. You were real. We can fix this. We can't because I don't trust you. I'll never trust you again. And without trust, there's nothing to fix. Please. You told me that true love doesn't need money, remember? That I was too transactional, too focused on spreadsheets, not authentic enough. So prove it. Go find your authentic life. The one where love conquers all and money doesn't matter. Show me how that works out. Jason, I'm done, Rebecca. With you, with your family, with all of it. You wanted out, you got out. Don't call me again. I blocked the new number and went back to work. 6 months later, I sold the Dolly City house for $750,000. After commissions and closing costs, I walked away with about $400,000 profit on my original investment. Used it to buy a small place in Marin County, something clean and simple with a view of the bay. I heard through mutual friends that Rebecca was working retail at Nordstrom, the same Nordstrom where she used to drop $1,000 on a shopping trip. Her parents were still in Stockton. Marcus was back in jail for violating probation on the DUI. I felt nothing about any of it. No satisfaction, no guilt, just a kind of distant acknowledgement that people make choices and choices have results. The divorce was finalized in October. I signed the papers at David's office, had a bourbon, and went home to an empty house that was actually empty by choice this time, not because someone had taken from me and left. My phone rang a few weeks later. Unknown number, but I answered because I was expecting a call from a contractor. Jason, it was Carol. How'd you get this number? I asked around. I'm sorry to bother you. I just wanted you to know that we're doing okay. It's been hard, but we're managing, and I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. You were good to us. We took advantage of that. I see that now. Okay. Is there anything? Is there any way we could talk? Not about getting back together with Rebecca, just, I miss you. You were part of our family for a long time. I wasn't part of your family, Carol. I was funding for your family. There's a difference. That's not fair. It's accurate. You want to know how I know? Because if I'd been family, someone would have told me my wife was unhappy. Someone would have suggested marriage counseling or couples therapy or anything other than support her decision to leave. But you didn't. You just kept cashing the checks until the bank closed. We made mistakes. You made choices. Own them. Can't we? No. Whatever you're about to ask, the answer's no. I'm not lending you money. I'm not helping you move. I'm not giving you a second chance to prove you've changed. I'm just done. You're not bad people, Carol. You're just people who use someone until he stopped being useful. And that's fine. That's your right. But it's also my right to protect myself from being used again. Rebecca really did love you. She loved what I provided. When that dried up, so did the love. That's not love. That's a transaction. And yeah, I'm transactional. I'm comfortable with that, but at least I'm honest about it. You guys pretended it was family while treating me like an ATM. That's worse. I hung up, deleted the number, went back to my life. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. If I wish I'd handled it differently, been more forgiving, given them another chance. The answer's always the same, no. I don't regret teaching people that you can't use someone indefinitely and expect them to keep showing up. I don't regret protecting my resources and my dignity. And I definitely don't regret refusing to be the backup plan when their first choice didn't work out. Rebecca wanted authentic. I gave her authentic. Turns out authentic means dealing with reality without someone else's money to cushion the fall. That's not cruelty. That's just life. And me, I'm fine, better than fine. I'm in a house I chose with a life I built, surrounded by people who see me as more than a solution to their financial problems. I date sometimes, nothing serious. I'm careful now. I watch for patterns. I ask questions. I don't lead with my wallet anymore. The Dolly City house is a rental property now. managed through a company so I never have to think about it. It generates passive income. Good return on investment. That's what it was always supposed to be anyway. An investment, not a family, not a relationship, just an asset on a spreadsheet. Turns out I was right about that all along. I just had to lose a marriage to figure it out. Sometimes at night, I think about that last conversation with Rebecca, the one where she asked if I'd ever really loved her. I told her I loved who I thought she was, but that wasn't quite true. The truth is, I loved the idea of being someone's stability. I loved being needed. I loved solving problems and seeing people's lives improve because of me. That's not love. That's ego. That's the need to be important. Rebecca didn't break my heart. She just showed me who I'd become. Someone who confused being useful with being valued. Someone who thought if he gave enough, people would eventually see him as more than a resource. She did me a favor, really. Taught me that love without respect is just exploitation wearing a prettier mask, and that the only person responsible for protecting my dignity is me. The house in Marin is quiet. I like the quiet now. I like not having to manage anyone else's crisis or finance anyone else's mistakes. I like being alone with my spreadsheets and my bourbon and my view of the bay. I'm good at being alone. Turns out I always was. I just needed permission to stop pretending otherwise.
I caught Asael trying to break into my house. When her reason was revealed, I was stunned. I'm 27. When I married Kyle, my husband of 3 years, I was excited about our future together. We were the same age, and we had been through so much together, including the ups and downs of life, but nothing prepared me for what would happen next. Let me start by explaining a bit about my relationship with my family-in-law. Kyle and I had been dating for 6 years before we got married. Over those years, I had met his family several times, and while things were mostly cordial, there were always subtle tensions between Kyle and his parents, especially with his sister, Lizzie. It was clear that Kyle's family wasn't exactly thrilled with me being in his life. I never fully understood why, but Kyle had always told me that his family had their own issues with him that I didn't need to be involved with. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to the warning signs. There were moments when Lizzie would make comments that seemed innocent on the surface, but carried a darker undertone. She would often mention how close she and Kyle used to be before I came along, or how their family dynamics had changed since he started dating me. At the time, I dismissed these comments as normal sibling nostalgia, but now I understand they were early signs of her possessive behavior. Lizzie, Kyle's younger sister, had always been an enigma to me. On the surface, she appeared sweet, helpful, and well-intentioned. But over time, I realized that she was quite manipulative, especially when it came to Kyle. She would often make passive-aggressive comments about his decisions or insinuate that he wasn't good enough for me. Kyle never really confronted her about it, and I tried my best to stay out of it, not wanting to stir the pot. But deep down, I was growing increasingly frustrated with the way she treated him. When Kyle and I decided to get married, we made sure to keep the event small and intimate. It was our day, and we didn't want anything to overshadow it. But, of course, Lizzie had other plans. She was persistent about being heavily involved in the wedding preparations, and while I appreciated her enthusiasm at first, it quickly became clear that she wasn't doing it for me. She wanted to be the center of attention, even if it meant undermining my decisions. At one point, she even tried to pick out my wedding dress for me. I felt cornered, but Kyle assured me it was just her way of trying to be part of the celebration. The wedding came and went without any major drama, but it didn't take long before things started to unravel. Lizzie and I had an uncomfortable conversation one afternoon when I was visiting Kyle's family. She was sitting at the kitchen table when she casually mentioned that she had noticed I was spending a lot of time with Kyle's side of the family, implying that I wasn't as close to my own family. I felt defensive, but I didn't respond. That conversation stuck with me, though. I couldn't shake the feeling that Lizzie was trying to create friction between me and Kyle. A few months later, Lizzie came to me with a proposition. She said she knew how much I valued family, and since Kyle wasn't as close with his family, She thought it would be a good idea if I tried to bridge the gap and help them reconnect. She claimed it was because she knew I understood the importance of family, especially when things got tough. She suggested that if I helped fix Kyle's relationship with his parents, I could be the one to make them see things my way. At first, I was flattered by her trust in me, but the more she spoke, the more I began to feel like she was trying to manipulate me into doing her bidding. She knew I didn't want to cause trouble with Kyle's family, but it was clear that this wasn't about healing relationships. It was about Lizzie wanting to control the narrative. I agreed to help, thinking that it could be a way to bring everyone together. But as I started to have more conversations with Lizzie, I realized I was being pulled into something I didn't want to be part of. Every time I tried to have a conversation with Kyle about his parents or his sister, he would shut it down, saying that he didn't want to deal with their issues and that he was happy keeping his distance. I understood that, but Lizzie's persistence began to wear me down. One afternoon, as I was getting ready to head to work, Lizzie called me. She was insistent. She asked if she could come over to our house while Kyle was out. She said she just wanted to chat about the family situation, and because I didn't want to cause conflict, I reluctantly agreed. But the moment she stepped into our house, I felt uneasy. She sat on the couch, looking around as if she were inspecting my home. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just her being her usual self. Then she asked me a question that caught me completely off guard. "Can I have a copy of your house key?" she asked, her voice casual but edged with something else. I was taken aback. "Why would you need a key?" I asked, confused. Lizzie gave me a strange look before explaining. "Well, you work from home, right? What if something happens to you? I'm just worried that if you're ever in trouble and Kyle's not home, I'll be able to come in and help you out. It's just a precaution, you know?" Her words felt strange, but I didn't want to overreact. I politely declined, telling her that if anything happened, I'd call Kyle. I wasn't comfortable with the idea of giving her access to our house without a valid reason. Lizzie's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. She seemed disappointed, but didn't press the issue further. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Lizzie's request to have a key felt like an invasion of privacy, but I tried to convince myself it was just her being helpful in a weird way. However, things took an even stranger turn a few days later when I noticed that my house keys were missing from their usual spot. Panic set in. I checked every possible place they could be, but they were gone. I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me as I realized that Lizzie had probably taken them. Without confronting her directly, I tried to stay calm and think of a plan. I couldn't be sure, but the timing seemed too coincidental to ignore. That night, when Kyle came home from work, I told him what had happened. He seemed surprised but didn't make much of it. "Maybe you misplaced them," he suggested. "But if you're worried, we can change the locks." I immediately started making plans to get the locks changed, but I also needed to confront Lizzie. I called her, but when she didn't pick up, I decided to visit her apartment the next day. When I arrived, I knocked on the door. A man I had never met answered. I asked if I could speak with Lizzie, and he told me that she didn't live there. I was confused. Lizzie had given me that address the last time we spoke, but this man seemed certain she wasn't there. I showed him a picture of Lizzie, and he said he had never seen her. My heart raced as I texted Lizzie, asking her why she had lied to me about where she lived. Her response was curt. "You've got the wrong address." My mind was spinning. Why had she given me that address? Why had she lied about everything? When I came home, I felt on edge. My husband noticed immediately. "What's going on?" "You seem tense," he asked. After some hesitation, I confessed everything to him. I told him about the key request, the missing keys, and how I had been lied to about Lizzie's address. He listened carefully, but I could tell he was processing it all. That night, he made it clear that we needed to change the locks immediately and that Lizzie's behavior was unacceptable. We got a locksmith to come in and change the locks to ensure our safety. I blocked Lizzie's number and social media accounts, cutting off any further contact with her. But the story doesn't end there. 3 weeks after changing our locks, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, our neighbor called me in a panic. She had been tending to her garden when she noticed someone suspicious trying to get into our house through the back door. The person was wearing dark clothing and appeared to be using some kind of tool to manipulate the lock. I recognized her right away, she told me later. It was your sister-in-law. I've seen her at your house before. She was acting very strange, looking over her shoulder constantly. When I called out to her, she ran away. I immediately called the police and Kyle. The responding officers took our statements and my neighbor's detailed description. They found scratch marks around our back door lock, confirming that someone had indeed tried to break in. What made it even more chilling was that they found a small notebook dropped near our back gate. Inside were detailed notes about our daily routines, when we left for work, when we came home, even when we usually did our grocery shopping. The police managed to track down Lizzie at her actual address, not the fake one she had given me. When confronted, she broke down and admitted to everything. She had been stalking us for weeks, convinced that I was somehow turning Kyle against his family. In her disturbed mind, she believed that if she could just get inside our house, she would find evidence that I was manipulating him. Kyle was devastated when he learned the full extent of his sister's actions. The police wanted to press charges for attempted breaking and entering, but Kyle couldn't bring himself to see his sister arrested. Instead, we opted for a restraining order, which was granted immediately given the evidence and our neighbor's witness statement. The aftermath of this incident sent shockwaves through the family. Kyle's parents initially tried to downplay Lizzie's actions, suggesting that she was just worried about her brother. But when they saw the notebook with her detailed surveillance notes, even they couldn't deny the severity of the situation. They finally agreed to get Lizzie professional help, something that Kyle had been suggesting for years. The months following the break-in attempt were difficult. We installed a comprehensive security system, complete with cameras and motion sensors. I started seeing a therapist to deal with the anxiety and trust issues that developed from this experience. Even simple things like checking the mail or being home alone became challenging for a while. Kyle and I grew closer through this ordeal, but his relationship with his family became more complicated. His parents struggled to understand why we wouldn't just forgive and forget, especially after Lizzie started therapy. They would sometimes try to guilt us into lifting the restraining order, saying things like, "Families should stick together," and "she's getting better now." But we stood firm in our decision. This experience taught us both that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for your family is to maintain strong boundaries. We learned that love doesn't mean tolerating harmful behavior, and that protecting our peace and safety isn't selfish, it's necessary. Today, our life has found a new normal. We've moved to a different neighborhood, partly for my peace of mind and partly for a fresh start. Lizzie continues with her therapy, and while we hear she's making progress, we maintain our distance. The restraining order is still in place, and we've made it clear to family members that we're not ready to change that. I'm learning to trust my instincts now, to set boundaries even with family, and to always prioritize my own well-being and the safety of my home. And though the situation was complicated, I am grateful to have a husband who supports me, who believes in our future together and in protecting our peace. This experience, as difficult as it was, taught us both valuable lessons about trust, boundaries, and the importance of facing problems together rather than trying to maintain a facade of family harmony at any cost. Sometimes I think about the woman I was at the beginning of this story, so eager to please and maintain peace that I ignored my own instincts. I wish I could tell her that it's okay to trust her gut, to set firm boundaries, and to protect herself without feeling guilty. But perhaps that's the silver lining in all of this. Sometimes the hardest experiences teach us the most important lessons about who we are and what we deserve.
You convinced him to change his will. My dad told everyone when Grandpa left me his assets. The next day, my sister exposed another betrayal. Now I walk away forever. I'm 32 years old. Growing up, I was always the one who tried to keep things together in my family, even when it felt like things were falling apart. I guess it's because I was raised to believe that family was everything, that no matter what, you have each other's back. That was before my grandfather passed away. Grandpa and I were close, closer than anyone really understood. From when I was just a kid, he'd take me fishing on Sunday mornings, just the two of us. While everyone else was getting ready for church, we'd be out on the lake, watching the sunrise, talking about life. My parents never quite understood our connection, probably because they were too busy with work and social obligations to spend much time with him themselves. As I got older, our relationship only deepened. I'd drive over to his house after work, sometimes bringing takeout, other times just sitting with him on his porch, listening to his stories. He'd tell me about his struggles when he was younger, how he had to fight tooth and nail for everything. About the 3 jobs he worked simultaneously to put my father through college. About the small real estate investments he made that eventually paid off. He didn't have a formal education, but he was street smart in ways my parents never appreciated. I think he saw something of himself in me, a certain resilience maybe, a willingness to work hard without complaining. While my parents focused on appearances and status in their suburban community, I was more interested in substance, in building something meaningful even if it wasn't flashy. Grandpa noticed that. That's why when he died after a brief but intense battle with cancer, he left me most of his estate. The sum wasn't huge by today's standards, about $280,000, but it was enough to cause a lot of tension. Enough to buy a modest home outright in our area or start a small business. Enough to change someone's life trajectory. The reading of the will was a somber affair that quickly turned ugly. My father's face turned a deep shade of red, his jaw clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. My mother gasped audibly, her hand clutching her necklace. My sister Hannah just looked confused, her eyes darting between me and our parents. "There must be some mistake," my father said, his voice strained with barely controlled anger. "My father wouldn't do this." The lawyer adjusted his glasses and looked at my father with the patient expression of someone who'd seen this scenario play out many times before. "I assure you, your father was of sound mind when he made these decisions. We discussed his wishes at length, and he was quite clear about his intentions." That was the beginning of the end for my relationship with my parents. I had nothing to do with Grandpa's decision, but somehow they turned their anger on me. They couldn't understand why Grandpa would leave me everything. They believed they were entitled to it, and the moment they found out, everything changed. Within days, the whispers started. At first, they were just insinuations made during family phone calls. Relatives would call me, their voices tinged with a strange mixture of congratulations and suspicion. It took weeks before I learned the full extent of what my parents were saying behind my back. My childhood friend, whose mother was in the same gardening club as my mother, finally told me over beers one night. "Look, man, I don't know how to say this," he began, fidgeting with his bottle label. "But your mom's been telling people that you manipulated your grandfather, that you isolated him from the family in his last months and convinced him to change his will." I nearly choked on my drink. "What? That's insane. You know that's not true." He just nodded quickly. "Of course I know. I've known you since we were 10. But she's telling everyone who'll listen that you took advantage of an old man with dementia." "Grandpa didn't have dementia," I said, feeling sick to my stomach. "He was sharp as a tack until the cancer medications made him drowsy in those last few weeks." But the damage was already done. The warm family dinners, the birthday celebrations, they all turned cold. My father started calling me selfish to my face and much worse behind my back, from what I heard. My mother wouldn't even make eye contact with me at family gatherings, acting as though I'd committed some terrible betrayal. I tried to use some of the money in ways that would help my family, hoping it might ease the tension. I offered to help my parents with some home repairs they'd been putting off. My father refused outright, saying he didn't want stolen money. I suggested setting up a college fund for my sister's future kids. My mother acted as though I'd suggested something obscene. Hannah was the only one who hadn't changed. At least that's what I thought. I'd always thought of her as the one person in the family who truly understood me. She and I had always been close growing up. Sure, she was younger by 4 years, but we shared a bond. We'd protected each other during our parents' frequent arguments, built blanket forts in the living room, shared secrets and dreams. After everything that happened with the inheritance, I thought she'd be the one to stick by me. And superficially, she did. She still answered my texts, still met me for coffee occasionally. But there was a new distance between us, a cautiousness in how she spoke to me, as if she wasn't sure which version of me she was talking to, her brother, or the manipulative person our parents described. When Hannah finished college and struggled to find work that would cover her rent in the city, I stepped in to help. I didn't make a big deal of it. I just quietly transferred money to her account each month to cover the difference between what she could afford and what she owed. I didn't tell our parents, and neither did she. It was our secret, a way for me to use Grandpa's money to help my family, just as I knew he would have wanted. For 2 years, this arrangement continued, even as the family rift deepened. My parents stopped inviting me to holiday gatherings altogether. Family weddings became exercises in awkward avoidance. At my cousin's baby shower, my mother actually turned and walked in the opposite direction when she saw me enter the room. The truth was, I didn't know how much things had really changed until that day, the day of my father's birthday. He was turning 60, a milestone I couldn't ignore despite our strained relationship. I had bought a bottle of his favorite whiskey and a box of cigars. I wasn't expecting hugs or a warm welcome, but I figured I could at least show up and offer a peace offering. Maybe I could be a bigger person, right? I drove to my childhood home with a knot in my stomach, rehearsing what I might say. When I arrived at the house, Hannah answered the door. She looked surprised, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of me standing on the porch, gifts in hand. But she didn't seem angry, which I took as a positive sign. "Jeffrey," she said, raising an eyebrow, "I didn't expect you to show up." "Yeah, I figured I'd make the effort," I said, trying to sound casual while my heart hammered in my chest. "Thought I'd come for Dad's birthday." For a moment she hesitated, glancing back over her shoulder toward the living room where I could hear voices and soft music. I could see the calculation in her eyes, weighing the potential drama of my presence against the awkwardness of turning me away. But then she shrugged. "Well, come on in then." Everything felt normal for a few minutes as I stood awkwardly in the entryway. Hannah offered to take my coat, made some small talk about the weather. I could hear laughter from the living room, the clink of glasses. Then I heard my mother's voice, clear and carrying. "Who was at the door, Hannah?" Hannah and I exchanged a look. "It's Jeffrey," she called back. The laughter stopped, the voices quieted, and then I saw my parents emerge from the living room, their faces transforming as they registered my presence. My father's expression hardened into a mask of disapproval, his gray eyebrows drawing together. My mother's face fell, her practiced social smile vanishing in an instant. "Why are you here?" my father muttered, his tone cold, devoid of the warmth a father should have for his son. I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the hostility. "I came to wish you a happy birthday. I brought gifts." I held out the whiskey and cigars like a peace offering, hopping against hope that they might be accepted. He scoffed, not even looking at what I'd brought. "We didn't invite you." And that was it. The coldness I'd felt from them for months was now in full display, naked and unashamed. I tried to stay calm, to not let his rejection sting as much as it did. "Look, I'm not here to fight. I just wanted to show up, make things right." But my mother interrupted, stepping forward with her arms crossed protectively over her chest. "Why are you even here, Jeffrey? You always bring trouble. Just leave." Their words hit harder than I expected, like physical blows. I didn't know how to react. It felt like I was being pushed out of my own family, exiled for a crime I hadn't committed. I looked around the room. Other relatives were sitting in awkward silence, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. I noticed my aunt, who had always been kind to me, looking down at her hands. My uncle, who had taught me to drive, suddenly became very interested in his drink. No one was willing to stand up for me, to question the narrative my parents had created. Something inside me snapped then. All those months of accusations and whispers, of trying to understand why my own parents had turned against me, of maintaining dignity and restraint. It all came to a head in that moment of public rejection. "Celebrate?" my dad scoffed, gesturing vaguely toward the assembled family members. "You're nothing but a loser. You think a few gifts will make up for everything." That was the breaking point. All those years of trying to fit in, to make peace, to be the good son, it all came rushing back in that moment, alongside the fresh wound of his words. A calm clarity settled over me, a realization that no matter what I did, they had chosen their story about me, and nothing would change it. "Fine," I said, my voice shaking not with fear but with a cold anger I'd never allowed myself to feel toward my parents. "I'll go, but I've been paying Hannah's rent for the past 2 years because you couldn't be bothered to help her. Not anymore. That's on you now." The room fell silent. My revelation hung in the air, greeted with shocked expressions. Hannah's face went pale. My father's eyes widened in confusion, then narrowed in something like rage. But it was my mother who rushed forward, her expression suddenly shifting from contempt to desperation. "Wait, Jeffrey," she began, reaching out as if to physically stop me from leaving. "No," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. "I'm done." And with that, I walked out, leaving them in stunned silence. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glimpsed them through the front window, huddled together in what appeared to be an intense discussion. Hannah stood slightly apart, her arms wrapped around herself. I drove home in a strange state of numbness, the finality of what had just happened washing over me in waves. I had just cut ties with my family, or perhaps more accurately, acknowledged that they had already cut ties with me long ago. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I thought about Grandpa, about the conversations we'd had on his porch, watching fireflies blink in the gathering dusk, about how he'd told me once that family wasn't just about blood, but about who shows up, who listens, who cares enough to be present. The days after that night were intense. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Hannah had called me multiple times, left me several voicemails, and sent texts, all of them full of anger and confusion. I didn't pick up right away. I needed space. I wasn't sure what to think, but a part of me knew what I had done was necessary. Eventually, I listened to one of her voicemails. Hannah's voice came through strained and accusatory, explaining that our parents were freaking out and blaming her for everything after learning I'd cut her off financially. She demanded I call her back immediately. I sighed, tossing my phone aside. They were blaming Hannah now, too? It made sense in some way. After all, she was the one left in the middle of all this. But I didn't want to get dragged back into their drama. Still, part of me felt guilty. Hannah wasn't like the rest of them, at least I thought she wasn't. My mother's voicemail was equally revealing. She berated me for throwing Hannah under the bus, claiming they had no idea I was paying Hannah's rent. According to her, Hannah had told them she was managing on her own. This discrepancy raised immediate red flags. If Hannah had been lying to our parents about the financial arrangement, what else had she been hiding? About an hour later, she showed up at my apartment without warning. She didn't knock, just barged right in using the spare key I'd given her. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed as she launched into accusations about my disappearance and the family chaos I'd supposedly created. When she explained that our father was telling everyone I'd thrown a tantrum at the party and that family members were now angry with her for being the reason I stopped the rent payments, I was genuinely surprised. This was a narrative twist I hadn't anticipated. Her defensiveness when I questioned why she hadn't spoken up before only deepened my suspicions. As our confrontation escalated, I called her out on what I was beginning to see clearly. She had been playing both sides all along, manipulating me just as our parents had. The truth emerged in pieces as her defenses crumbled. After Grandpa died, Hannah had initially defended me against our parents' accusations, but that support had wavered when they suggested she was only taking my side for financial gain. When she couldn't find a job that paid enough for rent and came to me for help, she deliberately hid that arrangement from them. The betrayal went deeper. 6 months ago, when our mother directly asked if I was helping her financially, Hannah had lied, claiming I had offered but she had refused. Her deception was discovered when our parents found her bank statements while helping with her taxes. They saw the monthly deposits from my account. The worst revelation came when I pressed her about their reaction. Rather than admitting she had lied about needing rent money, Hannah had told our parents she had no idea why I was sending her money. This enabled our father to develop his own theory, that I was paying her for information about the family, essentially, that she was my spy. I was stunned by this ultimate betrayal. My own sister had allowed our parents to believe I was engaged in some nefarious scheme rather than admit she had needed financial help. Her justification that she thought it would be easier, that she would look innocent, and that since I already had money, it wouldn't matter to me what they thought, only deepened the wound. When I confronted her with the full extent of her manipulation, letting our parents believe their worst suspicions about me because it was easier than telling the truth, Hannah's eyes filled with tears. She claimed she hadn't meant to hurt me, that she was just trying to keep everyone happy. I saw her act for the first time. She hadn't been trying to keep everyone happy. She had been trying to keep herself in everyone's good graces, wanting my financial support without our parents' judgment, wanting to be both the good daughter and the loyal sister without standing up for what was right. As the reality of my cutting off financial support sank in, Hannah's panic became evident. When she asked what she was supposed to do about rent, I reminded her that she was an adult who needed to figure it out just as I had figured out how to deal with family ostracism. She had options: getting a roommate, finding a better-paying job, moving to a cheaper apartment, and now those were her choices to make. Her final attempt at reconciliation came as she was leaving. She claimed she had never believed what our parents said about me manipulating Grandpa. My response was pointed. If she had truly believed in my innocence, she should have said so loudly and repeatedly. Her silence had made her complicit. After closing the door behind her, I felt the emptiness of my apartment more profoundly than before. I had lost my sister today, or rather, I had discovered that the sister I thought I had never really existed. In the days that followed, I let all calls and texts from my family go unanswered. I needed space to rebuild, to redefine who I was outside of their expectations and manipulations. I heard from some relatives who had started to see through my parents' lies. My cousin called me up one evening. "Hey, Jeffrey," she said cautiously. "I heard about everything that happened. I just want you to know you're not alone in this." That surprised me. Really, I thought everyone was turning on me. "Well, not everyone," my cousin said. "Uncle has been talking to a few of us. We're not buying your parents' story anymore. They've treated you like crap for too long." This was unexpected. For once, some of the family was actually on my side. It felt like a small victory, but it wasn't enough to undo the damage that had been done. The emotional toll of everything that happened started to wear on me. I realized I had been giving so much of myself to my family for years, only to be taken advantage of. But now, I have to focus on myself. I couldn't keep trying to fix people who didn't want to change. Hannah's betrayal hurt, but it also gave me the clarity I needed. She wasn't the innocent sister I thought she was. She had been manipulating me just like our parents, and it hurt more than I expected. Sometimes family isn't what you're born into. Sometimes it's what you create for yourself after you walk away from toxic relationships, even when those relationships are with the people who should have supported you the most. Grandpa had known this, I realized. Maybe that's why he'd left me the inheritance in the first place, not just as a financial gift, but as a catalyst for truth, forcing everyone to reveal who they really were. In his own way, he had given me the chance to see my family clearly, without illusions. It was a painful gift, but perhaps the most valuable one I'd ever received. The conflict was resolved in an open-ended way. I cut ties with both my parents and Hannah. I told myself I wouldn't let their toxicity rule my life anymore. It was painful, but it was necessary. I realized that my worth wasn't tied to their approval. Looking back, I learned the hard way that not everyone in your life has your best interests at heart. Family can be toxic, and sometimes walking away is the only way to protect your own peace. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. It was time to start living for myself.